The music was too loud for anyone to notice me. That's probably the only reason I didn't throw up right there on the carpeted stairs overlooking the rooftop bar. She was laughing. Not the polite laugh she gives me when I tell her stories she's heard before. This was the kind of laugh where her head tilts back, where her whole body leans into the person in front of her. I hadn't seen her laugh like that in years. And it wasn't with her friends. There were no girls there at all. Just her, surrounded by men in shirts rolled up to the elbow, gripping drinks they didn't pay for. And right in front of her was him. The man from her work she barely talks to. The one whose name she always said with a joke. Wyatt. Who names their kid Wyatt anymore? Her fingers were on his shoulder. Her wedding ring wasn't on her finger. I blinked 5 times, hoping it was the lighting, the music, the distance, anything else. But no, it was gone. And I was right there. In the same room I was never meant to walk into. She said it was a girls' night. She said she'd be with Tanya, Megan, and Cheryl. People I've met. People whose birthdays I pretend to remember. I almost stayed home. I almost believed her again. But something felt off. You know when the air in your lungs starts to feel heavier than it should, and your brain whispers something's wrong, but your heart begs you to ignore it? That was me the moment she walked out the door 2 hours earlier in a red dress I hadn't seen in months. I never knew she still had that dress, or that it still fit like that. So I checked her location. Not because I'm paranoid, because I'm tired of feeling stupid. Because I'm tired of sitting at home folding laundry while she's out venting with the girls for the 3rd Thursday in a row. The map didn't say wine bar. It didn't say girls' apartment. It said Windley Plaza rooftop. I got in my car, and now I was watching her from the shadows of a hallway full of coats and noise and everything I wasn't prepared to see. She leaned closer to Wyatt. Her hand rested on his chest. And then she kissed him. Not a long kiss. Not passionate. But intentional, direct, without hesitation. The kind of kiss that doesn't happen by accident. That's when I realized. I hadn't blinked once since I got there. I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been 5 minutes, could have been 30. Time doesn't work right when your chest feels like it's collapsing inward. My fingers were clenched around my phone, and I didn't even remember pulling it out. I wasn't recording. I wasn't texting. I was just holding it like a shield, like it might protect me from what I was seeing. The worst part wasn't the kiss. The worst part was what happened after. He whispered something in her ear. She laughed again. Then, God help me, she reached up and fixed the collar of his shirt. Like they were in some quiet, private moment in their own little world. Like she'd done that before. Like it wasn't new. I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk right up to her, say her name, ask her what the hell she thought she was doing. But my feet wouldn't move. My body froze. And all I could do was watch as they moved toward the back patio where the lights were dimmer and the music quieter. He placed his hand on the small of her back like it was his right. And she didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. She smiled. I followed. Quietly. Like a coward, I guess. But I needed to know more. I needed to see it from closer, just once, so my brain wouldn't try to talk me out of the truth later. You know that voice in your head that always tries to rewrite events to make it hurt less? I didn't want to give it the chance. The hallway led to a glass door. I stood just outside of it, hidden behind a potted fake palm, heart beating so loud I was sure someone would hear it. I leaned slightly, just enough to see through the gap in the curtain. They were sitting side by side on a cushioned bench, drinks in hand, her legs crossed toward him. She was telling a story. I could see it in her hands, her animated gestures, the way her eyes lit up, the little smirk she did when she knew she was being charming. I had seen that look 100 times. None of those times were with me. He put his hand on her knee. She didn't move. Then she leaned in closer and said something. I saw his mouth drop open in a wide grin, like he couldn't believe his luck. That was it. I turned to leave. I couldn't watch anymore. I felt nauseous. My chest was tight, and I thought I might actually pass out right there in the hallway. But then, I kid you not, the door opened, and she walked out. Right past me, like I wasn't there, like I was a ghost, like I was a stranger in a crowded room. She was on her phone, smiling down at the screen, not even glancing around. And I thought, maybe for one desperate second, she's texting me. Maybe this is all a misunderstanding. Maybe she's telling me she misses me, that she's coming home. But when I looked down at my phone, nothing, not a single message. She disappeared around the corner. I waited until I couldn't hear her heels clicking on the concrete anymore. Then I stepped outside. I needed air. I needed something to punch. I walked to the railing of the rooftop and looked out over the city, hoping the wind would clear my head. Instead, I saw Wyatt walk out onto the patio, looking around. He wasn't looking for her. He was looking for me. I ducked back behind the palm like a teenager caught sneaking beer. My heart didn't just pound. It slammed against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Wyatt wasn't looking around casually. He wasn't checking for Kendra. His eyes scanned the rooftop like a man who'd seen something. Or someone. He wasn't supposed to. And it didn't make sense. There's no way he should have known I was there. I hadn't spoken to him. I hadn't moved. I'd kept to the shadows like some creep in a crime show. But something about the way he stepped outside, the slow, deliberate turn of his head, it felt like a predator sniffing the air. Like he'd felt me. He walked to the railing, pulled a cigarette from his coat pocket, and lit it without looking back. That's when I realized Kendra must have told him something. Maybe I came up in conversation. Maybe she'd mentioned I get weird sometimes. Maybe she said I was obsessive, or that I struggle with boundaries. I wouldn't put it past her. Over the past year, she'd turned me into a joke in her stories. At dinner parties, she'd mock how I stacked the dishwasher. She'd roll her eyes when I tried to explain how cloud storage worked. In front of friends, she'd laugh when I stuttered telling stories, interrupting to help me finish. I was wallpaper in my own life. And now, I was a ghost watching her flirt with a man who wasn't squinting past her to check the score of the game or pretending to listen. Wyatt flicked his ash into a planter and glanced toward the stairs again. My knees locked. I didn't know what to do. Leave and look guilty? Stay and risk being seen? Something about his calmness made me furious. He was too relaxed. Too confident. Like he wasn't sneaking around. Like I was the intruder in his story. So I did something really stupid. I stepped out. He looked at me the second my shoe hit the tile. Not surprised. Not curious. Just watching. Like I was right on schedule. Hey, he said, casual, like we were co-workers. You lost or something? I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how to. He took a drag of his cigarette, then exhaled slowly. You're Kendra's husband, right? He knew. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She told me you might come, he said. Told me you get these paranoid episodes sometimes. Show up uninvited. Misunderstand things. Paranoid episodes? Misunderstand? I wasn't even angry yet. I was too stunned. It was like he was reciting lines he'd rehearsed. Like they had discussed it, like this was planned. She said if you did show up, he continued, flicking his cigarette again, I should just talk to you. Keep things calm. That you mean well. You just overthink. I laughed. It was short and bitter and loud enough that a couple near the fire pit glanced over. Wyatt didn't flinch. He just waited. You think I'm here because I'm confused? I asked. I think, he said carefully, you're hurt. And maybe not seeing things clearly. I wanted to hit him. I'd never hit anyone in my life. I once apologized to a guy who stepped on my foot. But in that moment, the only thing keeping my fist from flying was the knowledge that if I did, Kendra would use it as proof. Proof that I was unstable, that I was dramatic, that I was everything she whispered behind my back for months. So instead I said, tell me the truth. Right now, have you been sleeping with her? Wyatt stared at me for a long time. Then he smiled. Not a smug smile. Not mean. Just tired. As if I'd asked a question he was expecting but still hated to answer. And he said, not yet. Not yet. Those two words hit harder than if he'd just said yes. Yes would have meant it was already over, already burned and buried. But not yet? That was worse. That was the promise of betrayal still hanging in the air, waiting to happen, scheduled like a dentist appointment. That meant it was close enough to taste. I turned away. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing my face twist, but I felt it anyway. The twitch in my eye, the pulse in my temple, the way my jaw clenched so tight it made my teeth ache. I leaned against the concrete railing, suddenly exhausted, like my spine couldn't carry the weight of it anymore. He didn't walk away. He stood there beside me, silent for a second, then said, look, man, I don't think she meant for it to get this far. She's just been. Don't. I didn't raise my voice, but it was the firmest word I'd spoken all night. It surprised even me. I didn't want his sympathy. I didn't want his apology. I didn't want to hear that she felt alone or needed connection or whatever other recycled excuse people like him hand out when they cross lines and call it healing. What I wanted was an answer I'd never get. Why wasn't I enough? Was it the way I dressed? Was it the way I lived? Safe, simple routine? The way I repeated stories or held my fork wrong Or forgot to buy almond milk every damn week? Was it that I was predictable? Was I boring? Because I had tried. Maybe not in the big, grand, rom-com way she wanted, but I tried. I worked late so she didn't have to. I texted her good morning every single day. I complimented her even when she was in sweats and hadn't slept. And I never, not once, stepped outside the bounds of our marriage. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe being loyal made me invisible. She's confused, Reid, Wyatt said. I turned back to him, squinting. She told you my name? He nodded. Of course she did. She talks about you a lot. That felt like a lie. Or worse, it felt true, but twisted. I imagined her describing me in pieces. The awkward husband, the homebody, the IT guy who never really got her. The man she once loved, but now just coexists with. It made me sick. I think you should go, I said. You sure? Before I do something I regret. Wyatt studied me for a second, then gave a small nod and flicked his cigarette into the planter. He walked off without another word, disappearing into the noise of the rooftop party like a shadow melting into others. I stood there alone for a while, not moving, not thinking. The city lights blurred beneath me. I could still hear music, laughter, the clink of glasses, like nothing had happened, like the universe hadn't just tilted on its axis. It felt surreal that people were still dancing while I was bleeding inside, quietly and invisibly. Eventually, I walked back down the stairs and left through the service exit. I didn't want to risk bumping into her. I didn't trust myself to stay calm. The car ride home was a blur. I don't even remember the turns I made. I just remember the silence. And when I got back to our apartment, I noticed something I hadn't before. Her suitcase was by the door, packed. There was a note on top. Just 2 words, scribbled in her handwriting. Don't wait. The suitcase looked like it had been zipped in a hurry. Corners of clothing were caught in the edges, and one of her shoes, the tan suede heels she wore exactly twice a year, was jutting out like it had tried to escape. I stood over it, blinking at the note again. Don't wait. 2 words, 8 letters, and somehow they carried the weight of 1,000 arguments we never had. It wasn't a goodbye. It wasn't an apology. It was a warning. Or worse, permission. I should have left it alone. I should have walked out, driven somewhere, checked into a cheap motel off the interstate, and slept under the mechanical hum of a wall unit air conditioner just to feel something neutral. But instead, I sat on the floor, right there in the hallway, and opened the suitcase. That's when things stopped making sense. On top were clothes, sure, but underneath, folders, papers, a tablet, charger cords wrapped neatly with Velcro, travel-sized toiletries, a labeled Ziploc full of USB drives, and wedged inside one of the side pockets, a stack of printed slides with the title Winderly Sales Team Expansion, Confidential Briefing. This wasn't a bag for a weekend escape. This was a bag for a trip, a professional one. She hadn't packed to run away from me. She'd packed for something planned. My stomach sank as I rifled through the documents, each one colder than the last. Budget proposals, contact sheets, hotel bookings in Austin under her name, meetings, team dinners, travel itinerary. She was scheduled to leave Monday morning. And none of this, not one piece of it, had ever come up in conversation. We used to tell each other when we'd be 5 minutes late coming home. Now she was planning an out-of-state corporate retreat with a man she barely knew and hadn't said a word. The final page stopped me cold. It was an RSVP form, not printed, but handwritten. A scanned image. It had her name, his name, a double reservation, 1 hotel room, 1 king bed. I just stared at it. I don't even know for how long. My brain was screaming, but my body had nothing left to give. No tears, no anger, just this weird, vibrating numbness that felt like it lived in my teeth. I couldn't decide what hurt more, that she was leaving, or that she never planned to tell me. That she would have gone, had her little affair under the veil of a sales conference, come back with a suitcase full of ironed clothes and a head full of justifications, and smiled at me like nothing happened. But she didn't go. She left the bag. She left the note, which meant something changed. I walked to the kitchen, gripping the counter to steady myself. My phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. My voice cracked on the first word. Hello? There was silence on the other end for a second. Then a voice I hadn't heard in years. Reid? It's Sloan, Kendra's sister. You need to come to the hospital. My heart stopped. What happened? I asked, gripping the counter like it might keep the floor from falling out. She was in an accident. On the highway. They're still running scans, but her voice broke. But she asked for you. The drive to the hospital didn't feel real. I don't remember the turns, the streetlights, or even putting on my shoes. I just remember the GPS voice repeating the same instruction 3 times because I kept missing the exit. I was shaking the entire way. Not from fear, exactly, not yet. Just this surreal, out-of-body sensation like I was driving someone else's car through someone else's crisis. I kept hearing Sloane's voice in my head. She asked for you. Not her mom. Not her best friend. Me. It didn't make sense. A few hours ago, she was kissing another man, planning a trip, writing notes like a coward. And now she was in a hospital, hooked up to machines, saying my name? What the hell changed? When I got to the emergency room, Sloane met me at the entrance. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Makeup smudged, jacket half on. Holding a paper cup of coffee, she clearly wasn't drinking. She's stable, she said, before I could ask. They're keeping her overnight for observation. Concussion. Some bruised ribs. Nothing internal. I nodded, but the words didn't land. My eyes were scanning every corner of the waiting room, expecting Wyatt to show up at any moment. But it was just me and Sloane and an elderly couple whispering in the corner. I shouldn't be here, I said quietly. I think I'm the last person she wants to see. Sloane looked at me for a long time. Then she said, she was crying when they brought her in. Barely coherent. She kept saying your name. Not even my name. Yours. That felt like a punch. She led me down a sterile hallway, where everything smelled like antiseptic and sick people trying to pretend they weren't afraid. Room 214. I stood outside the door for what felt like hours. My hand hovered near the handle, unsure whether I was about to step into a reconciliation or a firing squad. I finally opened it. Kendra looked small. That's the first thing I noticed. Not fragile, small. Like her presence had shrunk. The woman who once filled every room with noise and perfume and motion was now buried under a hospital blanket, her head bandaged, for in her arm, mascara streaked down her cheeks like bruises. She turned her head toward me slowly. Her eyes were bloodshot, but focused. Reid, she whispered. My name. Like it was the only word she remembered. I stepped in, closed the door behind me. Didn't sit. Just stood there like an unwanted guest in the home I used to live in. She didn't say sorry. Not right away. She just stared at me like she was still trying to believe I was real. Then she reached to the side of the bed, slowly, with effort, and pulled out something from her jacket pocket. Her phone. She slid it toward me. I didn't send it, she said. I typed it, but I couldn't. I picked it up. The screen was already lit. An unsent message. I'm sorry. I can't do it. I love you. Please come home. The timestamp said 7:52 p.m. That was before the party. Before I saw her kiss him. Before the rooftop. Before everything. You were leaving him? I asked. She nodded, eyes full of tears. I told him at the bar. Right after that stupid dance. I told him I wasn't going. That it was over. I told him I was going to fix us. I left early, got in the car. She trailed off. Then, he followed me. We fought. I swerved. That's all I remember. It felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. I had walked in expecting to hate her, to scream, to demand answers. And now I was just trying to breathe. I looked down at the suitcase again in my mind. At the note, the reservation, the betrayal that might have already been backing away from the edge when I saw it. I don't know what to believe, I said quietly. And she whispered, then start with this. I wanted to come home. To you. I didn't sleep that night. After they discharged her from the hospital at 3:12 a.m., I drove her home. Not because I wanted to. Not because I forgave her. Because no one else showed up. Not her sister. Not her mother. And definitely not Wyatt. And when I opened the passenger door, she got in like she'd been expecting it. Like this was how it was always going to go. We didn't talk. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was clinical. Like a shared waiting room in some larger catastrophe neither of us could process yet. Her eyes were glassy the entire drive. She didn't look at me once. At home, she dropped the hospital discharge folder on the table, peeled off her jacket, and went straight to the shower. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the coffee machine like it might give me advice. My legs were vibrating under me, nerves firing at random. My hands shook, and I didn't know if it was exhaustion, fury, or just emptiness. 15 minutes later, she came out in one of my old shirts, one I hadn't worn in years but recognized instantly. It used to be my favorite. She always said it made me look softer. Now it just looked like an apology on her body. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. "I just didn't want the last thing you remembered about me to be that party." I nodded. I wanted to believe that was why she asked for me at the hospital. That she had meant what she said. That she had told Wyatt no. That she'd meant to send that message. That she had tried to come back to us before everything went up in flames. But then the doorbell rang. We both froze. It was 4:07 a.m. I opened the door, bracing myself. Maybe it was Sloan. Maybe it was a neighbor. Maybe it was Wyatt coming to fight for her like some idiot from a romance movie. But it wasn't. It was a courier. "Package for Kendra Vallon?" the man asked. His uniform was damp from the rain. His voice was tired. I looked at her. She didn't move. "Yes," I said. "I can sign." He handed over a small, padded envelope. "No return address. Light, like paper inside." I shut the door and handed it to her. She blinked at it like she didn't recognize her own name. Then she slowly tore it open. Inside was a single printed photo. Color. High resolution. Kendra and Wyatt. At the rooftop party. Standing too close. His hand on her waist. Her eyes locked on his lips. Frozen in that pre-kiss moment. On the back, in thick black marker, was one word. Liar. She dropped it. Didn't speak. Just collapsed onto the floor like someone had pulled the strings out of her. I stared down at her, at the photo, at the envelope, trying to make sense of what this was. Who had taken that photo? Who had sent it? Wyatt? One of her co-workers? Or someone else entirely? I picked it up and turned it over again. The timestamp was printed in the bottom corner. 8:04 p.m. That was 2 minutes after she told me she left early. 2 minutes after she supposedly ended things. 2 minutes after she said she wanted to come home to me. So now I knew. She lied. Just not in the way I thought. I didn't speak for a long time. Not when she tried to explain. Not when she said the picture was out of context. Not even when she said she didn't know who sent it. I just stood there, holding the photo in one hand and watching her come apart in front of me like a version of her I'd never seen. No defenses, no charm, no rehearsed expressions. Just a person who had built a fire she didn't know how to put out. And me? I didn't feel angry anymore. I was past anger. Something else had taken its place. Not forgiveness, not peace, but something quieter. Something like clarity. Because for all the mess, for all the betrayal, I finally saw it for what it was. This wasn't a story about a woman who stopped loving her husband. It was a story about two people who stopped looking at each other, who drifted quietly, who lived parallel lives under the same roof, hoping the momentum of the past would carry them through the silence of the present. But that night, sitting on the floor next to her, both of us wrecked in different ways. Something shifted. "I lied," she said, voice thin. "I was afraid you'd never look at me the same again. I told myself if I fixed it fast enough, I could erase it. I never wanted to hurt you. I swear to God, Reid. I wanted to turn around. I just didn't know how. I could have left. I had every reason to. But instead, I reached for her hand. It was cold, shaking, but it curled into mine without resistance, like her fingers remembered the shape of me. "I don't know if we'll ever be the same," I said, "and I don't know what happens next. But if we're going to burn it down, let's at least do it together." She cried. Not the pretty kind. The ugly, messy, red-faced kind. I held her anyway. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something other than numb. We didn't fix everything that night. There's no miracle ending here. But we started talking, really talking, about the quiet resentments, the distance, the way I retreated into work, and the way she retreated into anything that felt like attention. We went to therapy. We took time apart. We argued. We healed. And eventually, we made it. Not because it was easy, but because we both finally decided it was worth choosing each other again, every single day. Kendra isn't the woman she was back then. And honestly, neither am I. That photo's still in my drawer. Not as a reminder of what almost broke us, but of what we survived. And if you've made it this far, thanks for listening. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever forgiven someone who betrayed you? And if so, was it worth it? This was Reid. And yeah, somehow, we're still standing.